MageCONF. I'm really glad to be here on this virtual stage. I really enjoyed the Magento conference in Kyiv. Yeah, but now we are worldwide, probably it's even better. So anyway, my talk will be about one of the biggest pain I've heard while talking with Magento community about testing. And one of the questions I always heard was, how do we test multi-store applications? At first, I didn't know what multi-store applications are. So that was my biggest problem. But then I was working with some companies that had big e-commerce websites, and that they actually wanted to have their tests automated. So in this talk, I will share my experience of automating most of important parts of your testing workflow through all the stores you have using the single code base. So my name is Michael, and I'm author of Codeception framework. And yeah, I really enjoy testing. I really enjoy PHP. I worked as consultant and trainer regarding to these topics. And now I am trying to build my own sustainable product, also regarding to testing. Check it out. It's Testomato, a system for test management. So if you know what automated tests are, if you work with PHP, you probably heard of Codeception. And Codeception basically is a framework that allows you to write your tests in this fancy manner, where you describe your actions in very high level language. You describe your actions you want to do. So I want to open website, buy some product, click here and there, and to see the result. And all this is written in this very fancy and nice syntax. This is like the basic and the idea of Codeception. And yeah, Codeception is full stack testing framework. So what it means that it covers unit tests, browser tests, and all kind of testing you may need. It has BDD style syntax that I explained just, and it supports browser testing with WebDriver. This is very important because if we test multi-store web application, probably we need to access the real websites and to click here and there, so to perform the real actions. Yeah, and one of the important things about the Codeception is that it powers a Magento testing frameworks. You may probably know it. But this talk is not about Magento testing framework, it's about Codeception only. So the question is, one of the interesting questions, maybe today is not the best time to use Codeception. Maybe we should try something more fancy, because yeah, technology evolves, is Codeception still a thing? And yeah, I would say yes. So first, because we have very cool interactive pause, so we can pause test executions at any time, and yeah, wait for execution to finish. Second, we have built-in retries and conditional actions. So when we try to click on some element on page and it doesn't work, we can retry it a few times, or if we need to do some actions that are some kind, sometimes they may work, sometimes they are not. So like closing the pop-up with the customer's support chat, maybe it appears, maybe it's not, and we need to close it anyway. So we have this functionality. Yeah, Codeception has everything that is needed for testing. Yeah, so that's and it's built in PHP, so you don't need to learn a new language. It has scalable architecture, and that's a thing we will use while trying to test the multi-store application. So Testing web applications can be pretty straightforward, because at first we need to set up browsers, install Codeception, install Selenium, and then we setting up web applications, and we write our tests, and we have them automated. We are happy. That's how things should work in theory. But when we do some complex testing, like when we have multi-store application, then we need to implement some very interesting logic in it. So the problem here is that when we have multi-store web applications, the stores have different UI. Stores are different in data, and we may have different types of forms, like so different kind of options users see working with our e-commerce websites. So one of the e-commerce sites can be for German, one of the for British, for USA. You will have difference in delivery, in payment, in name, in information you ask, and that's the biggest pain. So how can we write our tests once, but still our tests be aware of all those differences across the different region and customization settings? So yes, so our idea is that we write essential tests once. So it means that we build the tests the way that this test can be reused for all the stores across the project. What are essential tests? I think the most essential test we need is the checkout, the full journey that user passes from the beginning, opening a website, picking a product, ordering it, paying it, and shipping it. So this journey should be taken fully on all web stores to check that they actually work. Yeah, the payment part is very important in this case. So if we include payment, we may probably go to the PayPal or to the Stripe, to the third-party website to make the payment. So we may check even that part. And yes, we will check that cart, that we can add product to cart as well. And some basic actions like this one. And how we will have these tests to be written only once and then shared across the product. We will abstract our UI differences in page objects. And if the tests will need different data for different stores, we will put this data into stores. So I will show some code, and this probably one of the first part of some introduction slide when we will have lots of coding in next slides. And this shows the general architecture of such testing framework. So it's built with Codeception, I remind you. So if you work with Codeception, you will see some common names like support, where we store all the files we'll need. So we have a global Codeception project and some projects in it. So each client, each store, I should call it store. Each client should have its own tests, but they all inherit information from the main data classes and taking out the test cases into it. So we extend customize data, customize UI elements, and implement tests inside for every client. So how is abstract checkout test looks like? This is how. I can give you some like 20 seconds to read this code, because I would say it really looks like a very enterprisey kind of Java, where you read the very complex business logic and you understand how the software implements it. But even if it looks like Java, it's still valid PHP. And the idea here is that we describe our actions, but in very high abstract manner, where we just tell the business actions. And some business actions are delegated to page objects. So when I say this cart page, it means this is the context of cart. And then it means that I'm checking this page object is implementing this behavior. Then we go to the delivery page, and the next actions will be performed on delivery page. Then we go to payment page. So page objects here is needed to have those actions separated depending on the context. This test can be used for every store without a change. This is the awesome result that we want to achieve, that we not implement a test at all. Yeah, sorry, it's my neighbors somewhere. Yeah, quite sorry for the noise, but you never guess when they want to do some repairment works. Anyway, let's go to the test case. Yeah, as I said, our test case fully implements the test from here. So we don't need to copy it in any way. What we need to do is to pass it in the page objects and data objects. So here what we do it in Codeception. So we implement a test. We use injection feature to inject all the objects we have. And here we just store it to class, and they will be passed into the test. So just to recap the main idea. So all the stores will be using the same test. We use page objects, and we will override all different actions from the page objects, and the data will be overridden from the data objects. For instance, why would we do it? Imagine that some stores sell a product that needs a user consent about their age. So to specify that I am old enough to buy that kind of product. And when we perform a payment, we need to set to pass in the form that will fill our data about our date of birth. So this is, then we go for this specific store, we open a page object for payment, and we override the agree on terms function to also fill in this data. For our other stores, we don't do anything. We just rely on basic behavior. Probably the basic behavior will be just selecting a checkbox. Okay, so what the hell are data objects? And how can we use them in our test? So data objects is abstraction that allow us to provide data for our tests. So yeah, we have quite different stores with quite different products with them. And we need some changes here and there to provide country, if this regional store, provide postcodes that will match that country. But for everything else, the data must be generated. And the best way is to have Faker library to pass in the data, to not think of your own about names, street addresses, and so on. Usually that passes, but to make sure that all validations are passed correctly, we will need to hard code some values like this one. Yeah, the test was written in a very abstract manner, and to make it very flexible, so every store could change its configuration, but test will still pass. To achieve this result, we will split all the actions into smaller pieces. So not just I fill in delivery address, but I fill name, I fill my address, I fill my billing address, and so on. So how small should be the spaces? It very depends on on your actual differences between applications. So you will discover this by yourself while working on this. So you will just break things into smaller pieces until you see that there will be enough to describe the application logic and override it for all places. We also need to prepare page objects for any data input. So because we don't know what elements will be on the page, what exactly fields will contain. So we will need to implement the page object. So it would take an array of parameters and then put that values into the fields on the website. So this way we could from client to client use absolutely different data input and still have our test look the same. Yeah, the main thing is to explore store differences. So when you will try to implement this architectural approach to have one test for all stores, try to think which are the most different stores you may think you have. So one is regional store for US or UK, and second is global store which sells only online products. What are similarities in them? What are differences? And by exploring those differences and trying to implement tests one by one from this store and that store, you will probably cover all possible cases for other stores that you may have on your platform. So what kind of difference we have? So there are region differences, payment providers. So yes, the tests will differ on them, consent, and delivery providers. So if you try to abstract your actions that way that you could switch those things very easily. Yeah. So how the flexible page object will look like. So that's what I mentioned on my previous slide, that when we pass data from billing address, we expect it to be an array. Which fields will be in that array, we don't know. So depending on the specific store, the fields may be very different. And as you see, our page object is very flexible to work depending on the data we pass it. So if this data is empty, it's okay. We can still proceed to payment. If we have some information in the billing address, we want to override the billing address, we pass this into the other two functions. Those two functions will take the data and put them into fields like a user do. So we pass this data in. So this method can be overridden for a specific store. This method can be overridden for the specific store. So they're very flexible, and no matter how you change your interface, you can still rely on this function. And yeah, one interesting point is that here I use retry click function instead of just click, because yeah, sometimes pay button is not activated, or maybe it's not scrolled fast. So retry is pretty new functionality of Codeception, which yeah, does what it says. If click that didn't work first time, it tries to re-click a few times more, and this is awesome, I think. This really increases the stability of the test. So what happens when you add more and more and more stores into your application? You will face constant refactor. So sorry, no magic here, but you will need to update some parts of other stores as well, again, to face the differences and to have this main code base that will match all the possible stores. What I recommend you to do if you have like 10 or 20 or 30 stores and you want to easily spin up tests for them, because if the changes are not so big, you can just create a project generator that will just copy all required files. You will tell like, create me tests for this store like XYZ, and it will create this tests. You will run this test, and you will see that, wow, these tests are passing. That so you will get tests for free, and you will save a lot of your time if you create this project store generator that it will create all the file structure for you. Just based on your previous projects, probably you will need just to copy paste everything. The stores will be different in configuration. So something like credentials, URLs, whatever you may need to change the behavior in the stores. I would recommend to use .env files for that, because this is a standard for configurations. They can be easily parsed by Codeception. Yeah, for each store, I am picking up this .env file, and I place all the information inside of it. So let's assume we have all these tests written. And now is the most dramatic point. We need to execute those tests in the real browser, on the real website. Okay. Let's assume the start test passed locally, but to be honest, that you won't run tests for 10 or 20 or 30 stores locally. It has no sense. If you have lots of stores, you will need to set up constant testing on continuous integration platform. All the tests should be put into the pipelines. And here's the problem, that in the ideal world, we assume that each test, each store will be tested in its own job. And now think of it, if we have 30 or 50 stores, we need 30 browsers running and 30 PHP processes, and all of them should be run in parallel. So from the resource consumption perspective, it looks like this. We had nothing, and then we had 30 processes running once a time and at once, and we need to get a lot of memory. So just to clarify, we will have a big memory consumption for this. And if you have self-hosted CI, you will need to set up something some additional infrastructure to make this things run. Probably you will need Kubernetes and other solutions to scale your tests up and down. So I will probably talk about this later, but the main problem is our browsers. If you want 30 browsers to run in parallel, we need 30 browsers. And each browser will take for about a gigabyte of RAM. So we need a very powerful server. So probably I would recommend you to use cloud-based CI, which does this scaling for you. So you won't need to spend your time and resources on configuring this manually, at least if you don't have DevOps angels in your team. So again, keep this number in mind, that each test will take 1 gigabyte of RAM because of browser. You can use Selenium Grid to scale the browsers, which is not really a scalable solution, because Selenium Grid, when you execute the Selenium browsers, it will spin up 30 browsers, and it won't scale them down after the test's finished. So the memory consumption will be very high. The better alternative is our KubeMoon. This is Kubernetes alternative for Selenium Grid, paid product. But what I like it for, and lots of companies like it, because it can use auto-scale feature of Kubernetes to scale browsers up and down. So you have 0 browsers at the beginning, then you need to execute your test. It spawns 30 browsers for you and scales them down afterwards. Still, there is this very popular cloud-based solutions for browser scanning. But to be honest, I wouldn't recommend them, because their prices are based on the constant browser number. And the more browsers you need in parallel, the more money they will charge you. So something like 30 browsers at Browser Stack or South Labs, it's very big money. So, and you don't need all the browsers run in parallel all the time. You just need to spin them up and spin them down. So as far as I know, these companies do provide you a plan that allows you this flexibility in spinning up and down as many browsers as you wish, and this pay-as-you-go plan. After you have the tests running on CI, you will need to see the reports, which stores passed the test, which stores are not, so see what happened. So reporting is very important part here because we have 30, 50 stores and we need to watch what happened to each of them. So there are some implementations. The most simple and naive is Codeception HTML report. You can publish this as artifact with your CI tool and then review it afterwards. It's very nice. More professional solution is Allure report. It generates a very fancy page with all the steps. If you use MFTF, you probably use Allure already. Another alternative is Report Portal. It's an open source solution which not only collects reports for you, it can show you trends and various metrics about test executions, very enterprising. And Testometeo, the project I'm working on, which also can show you HTML reports. Probably the last one is the most easy to set up. But yeah, you should look into all the options and take what better fits for your setup. But anyway, reports are very important for this case. Again, if test failed, you need to know for which store and why, because rerunning all the tests for all the stores is very resource-heavy operation. So the time is almost up, but I will, and I'm on my very last slide, I will try to sum up about testing multi-store application. So at first, we need to invest our time in building proper architecture. So the draft of this architecture was shown in this talk. So what we need to do is to have abstract page object and override them depending on the context. Use data objects. It's some kind of new concept that is not very common in Codeception, but I came to this idea because I need to manage data differently for all the stores, and Faker really helps me to manage this data. Running infrastructure will be your pain, so think of it beforehand how you will execute tests when you will have lots of them. And if your stores are not very different on their own, spinning and adding a new store will be quite easily. So you will scale your tests very, very fast. So that's probably it in my talk. So thanks for listening, watching. Sorry for the noise. You never know when the neighbors want to repair stuff in their houses. Unfortunately, it happened today. But yeah, I had hopes that you have heard everything. Anyway, I will have my slides. So you will be able to review, and you can ask me questions about this information, and I can share all the things that were not so clear from this talk. So thank you again.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah. We have 16 people currently in and no questions so far. Guys, please type down your questions if you have any. I was checking the people in the session. Most of them are QA. So, guys, I believe you should have something to ask.
Yeah, I think I spent on this project 3 months or maybe 2 months. It's why don't you have a question that can save you this time?
I believe if I were a QA, I would definitely ask you something, but unfortunately I'm not, so.
Yeah, very specific topic, and the testing is also very specific.
Yeah, I'm only familiar with manual testing, but I'm definitely far away from, from the topic. Okay, I believe if we have no questions, but nonetheless, in case you have any questions pop up in your mind, you will be able to find Michael during the networking or after that on the hop-in. So make sure to find him if you have any questions or just if you want to chat. Also, again, want to remind you that we will have the recordings of all the sessions and they will be available on YouTube. So don't worry, you won't miss anything. And since still we have no questions, I would like to say thank you, Michael, for your presentation and welcome each and everyone to the main stage where we will have the closing remarks and closing of the conference shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.